Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichman along with Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston. Well, remember the Star Wars adoption that stole our hearts last month in Delaware, but it does allow us to focus on the bigger issue of foster care and adoption.
From Star Wars to Ninja Warrior, meet the physical therapist who applies his reality TV show training to some real-world rehabilitation to help a 10-year-old from Millsboro.
And how about a story about everyday people dealing with everyday issues of caring for a loved one? We have an update on Delaware's CARE Act. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
A stable family can create a healthy foundation to help kids reach their full potential. But finding that stability can be difficult for children in foster care. Our first look this week explores Delaware's foster care system, and along the way, we meet a young girl transitioning from foster care to a forever family. Meet 4-year-old Star Wars fan Zoe. This December, after more than 3 years in foster care, Zoe was adopted in a very unique ceremony featuring some familiar figures from a galaxy far, far away.
We are here as representatives of the Galactic Empire. And we want to congratulate Zoe and her forever family.
The Star Wars-themed ceremony was the brainchild of Zoe's new mom, Deanna Petticone, who was inspired by princess-themed adoption ceremonies she had seen online.
So I asked her, if you could have anybody at your hearing, who would you want? And she said Darth Vader.
Family court judge Barbara Kroll was more than game to take part, even donning her Princess Leia costume and hair buns before finishing the ceremony with a lightsaber.
When we touch her forehead, she's going to become Zoe Amelia Petticoat.
When Deanna came to me the idea, I thought, oh, that would be great. And didn't know it was going to quite turn into what we did today, but she asked me if I'd be willing to do that. I said, oh, of course.
It's only once in a lifetime that she'll be adopted, and it's the only time I'll be adopting her, so I wanted it to be really special.
Zoe now has her forever home, which is a relief for Mom.
It's like a weight that I didn't know I'd been carrying is now gone. Just to know that, as I told her today, forever starts today. And it's forever now, and I don't have to worry ever again.
But there's plenty of kids in Delaware who are still in the foster care system.
As the end of November, we have 689 children in the state of Delaware that are in foster care. Now, not all of those children are in a position right now to need to be adopted, but we do have 79 children in foster care that are in need of permanent families.
Trinae Parker is the Deputy Director of the State Division of Family Services. She says the need for foster care providers is growing.
I wish I could say the need for foster care is decreasing, but unfortunately it's not. From this point last year, where we are now, we have approximately 75 additional children in foster care than where we were in 2015. Numbers are comparable in adoption in that there are more children that are in need of adoptive families right now than there were at this point last year.
The state has pictures of some of the children available for adoption posted online.
It's very difficult when children don't have the support of family, which is why creating adoption or creating families through adoption is so important. We know that children who are adopted are typically more successful with their education. They're less likely to become involved with the juvenile justice system because they do have the love and support of a family. So that's what we strive for our children in foster care.
The biggest quality a foster parent needs?
Really, it's just that desire to help a child, to help a family. That's really the most important thing for foster parents and adoptive parents.
While some foster families end up together forever, like Deanna and Zoe, lots more need temporary support through the foster system.
We have many, many children of all ages here in Delaware who aren't able to be with their biological family. And it's so great when we can find a family like we found today. And fortunately, we find others, but we still need many more.
Kids need a safe place to land. They need someone to raise them while their families are recovering. And it's just been the best thing I've ever done. Hardest thing I've ever done, but the best thing.
Nationally, the number of kids in foster care has increased, just like it's increased in Delaware. A federal report issued last year indicated there are nearly 430,000 foster kids in the U.S. That's an increase of about 30,000 over the past 5 years.
That's a lot. So what's the process for someone interested in becoming a foster parent?
Well, the state hosts a number of periodic informational sessions for people interested in each county. So if you're interested, you can call the Division of Family Services at 302-633-2657 or go online, and they have a lot of information online at kids.delaware.gov. The state partners with groups like Children and Families First and also A Better Chance for Our Children to help train those folks who are interested to take care of these kids and their new families.
So what happens to the kids who age out of the foster care system and have not been adopted?
It's been a big issue because they really have been sort of on their own. But in 2013, Governor Markell signed legislation to provide financial assistance to help those children who are aging out. It's called the Ready by 21 is what the legislation was called, and it helps kids who turn 18 in the foster care system with a financial stipend for things like housing, transportation costs, and to help pay bills like electricity, along with insurance. It's designed to mirror the help a typical 18-year-old would receive from their family. Okay,
a lot of good information. Thank you so much, Mark. Now, if you want to read more about Zoe's Star Wars adoption ceremony, check out Mark's story at newsworks.org/Delaware. And up next, a physical therapist at AI DuPont Hospital for Children made it to the Philadelphia City Finals in American Ninja Warrior, a show where competitors run through a gauntlet of extreme obstacles. Greg Fleming hasn't made it all the way yet, but he is using his ninja skills to help his clients get back to fighting shape.
42-year-old Greg Fleming. There's the drop in a big bounce.
The three-time veteran of American Ninja Warrior ran out of gas on Rolling Thunder. But it's not over for Greg Fleming.
Yes, I will be trying again.
The 43-year-old is a physical therapist at AI DuPont Hospital for Children in Wilmington.
Primarily, most of the kids that we see have had a brain injury, so I work with those kids on a daily basis and other diagnoses as well to help them get better range of motion, strength, balance, coordination, running speed, agility.
All things you need as a ninja, too. So Greg incorporates some of the Ninja Warrior type obstacle training into his rehab PT.
Even before I knew about Ninja Warrior, I think obstacle course training or having kids do obstacle courses is something that I've been doing and the other therapists have been doing for over 15 years. And now that Ninja Warrior is out, the kids love doing the obstacle courses even more.
Especially 10-year-old Garrett Rogers, a patient from Millsboro. G Money, as he's known by his friends back home, has come a long way since May, when he was hit by a drunk driver at Little League practice.
He was not conscious. He had a fractured skull, fractured orbital bones. He had a brain injury. His scapula was broken, both bones in his arm, his pelvis, ribs, his femur, and then lots of lacerations. 1, 2. He had to relearn how to speak, to eat, to walk. The brain injury affects everything, even his decision making, his speech. So he does occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and then they have a school program here, so he does school therapy.
Several surgeries, blood transfusions, and hours of therapy later.
Blast off, here we go, go time. Move those feet fast.
Garrett's doing better than anyone initially anticipated.
Where he is now is a miracle.
And Mom Wendy says Greg was a huge part of Garrett's recovery.
They've absolutely clicked from the beginning.
He
just responds to him. I think they definitely have a bond.
A bond forged through sweat, perseverance, and loss. Garrett's father, Kirk, died suddenly, just months before Garrett was hurt.
At home, he talks about him to people, and so I think having lost his dad and being able to have another male that can kind of step in that figure, even if it's just for an hour, is a blessing.
When Greg isn't training Garrett or others, he trains himself in the hospital employee gym. Garrett got to see Greg's ninja training up close on this day.
What do you think about Greg being on American Ninja Warrior? Is it cool that he's on it?
Yes, and it makes me want to push myself.
It's equally as motivating when I see Garrett and the other kids I work with in the hospital do the things that they do. So it pushes me to do better myself.
One thing's for sure, Garrett and Greg are both winners.
Since we taped the story, Garrett continues to get better. He's back to school 5 days a week and is getting stronger by the day. And Mom Wendy maintains a Facebook page on Garrett's progress for all of his supporters that can be found at G Money Strong. Meantime, we will be rooting for Greg on season 9 of American Ninja Warrior.
Coming up, helping those in need comes in many ways. Caring for a loved one in need can be difficult. Delaware's CARE Act offers some help, and art truly comes from many sources. First Experience has the connection between biochemistry and quilting.
State of Play time, and here is Steve Tanzer once again of DelawareLiberal.net. He's rubbing his hands together. He's ready to get to a new legislative session and a new governor. So let's tackle the legislature first. They are back, the lawmakers in Dover, outlining some areas where they see the need for improvement.
Job creation is number one, so I'm sure they'll be taking a hard look at the Coastal Zone Act. I'm sure that'll come up for discussion. So that's probably one. I know Governor Carney it's something on his agenda.
There's an opportunity here because people in this past election indicated they want some change, both nationally and in Delaware. And so I think that then gives sort of a mandate that we do some things differently maybe than we've done it in the past so that we can meet the shortfall. We can make cuts that are going to need to be made, but make them in a way that still provides good services to our people.
So, Steve, where do you see the focus of attention really being this year? It's got to be the budget, I would guess.
Absolutely. As of now, we're facing, depending on what the DFAC numbers end up as, anywhere between a $350 million and $400 million budget gap. Now, to be fair, that's less than what Governor Markell faced when he came into office in 2009. However, there are fewer resources available to the incoming governor than there were to Governor Markell. For example, we're going to be losing a significant amount of the revenue stream from the escheat takings, the so-called unclaimed property takings. Delaware had figured out a way where they could basically monopolize those, and now other states have jumped in, and I don't think that's going to be happening. So the question becomes for the new governor and the General Assembly, how do we close the budget gap? That obviously is the key issue. There's essentially three ways, combination of the three ways you could conceivably do it. One, of course, is through budget cutting. I will point out, however, that during the Markell years, there's been quite a bit of budget cutting already. Terms of staffing,
especially the easy cuts to make, the easy ones.
Right, and keep in mind now that a lot of the reason why we have the deficit is not based primarily on state policy. A lot of it has to do with federal policy when it comes to health care, things like that. Right. So it's not all the making of the General Assembly. They've done significant cutting. State employees, next to no raises, benefits cut back, pensions cut back, a lot fewer state positions than there were 8 years ago. So whenever anyone says we can just cut the waste, fraud, and abuse, a lot of it has been cut. The second way, of course, is revenue enhancement, which has traditionally not been the way the Delaware General Assembly wants to go, nor has it been the way that the governors have wanted to go.
And we did see that there was a sort of a bipartisan effort to raise some taxes, some fees 8 years ago to meet some of that huge
Correct.
Gap.
And they all, however, had what were known as sunset provisions.
Right.
So in theory, they all were going to end after a year. Some of them stayed in place, but for example, there was an increase to the highest tax rate during that time. That was sunsetted. That did not continue. Jeff Bullock, who is the current Secretary of State and is also John Carney's choice for Secretary of State, has said, we can do some of it, a significant amount of it, maybe a third to 40% of closing the gap by raising the corporation franchise taxes. These will not drive any companies out of Delaware because of all the advantages that they have staying here. And it would raise a significant amount of money. This proposal's been around for a couple of years. I don't know why Governor Markell didn't want to do it, even though his Secretary of State supported it. We'll see if John Carney supports it. We could have a couple of higher income tax brackets, which would raise some money. And the third way that you also can raise funds, and Pete Schwarzkopf talked about this in a Delaware State News interview that he did, is borrowing, which he doesn't like. And I don't blame him. Right. I mean, when you borrow, you're paying back with interest. So some combination of those three things is going to have to close this deficit. This will clearly be the primary focus of the Delaware General Assembly this year.
Obviously, when Jack Markell came into office 8 years ago, it was panic mode. It was a huge, huge problem. Do you get the sense that that's the feeling in Dover for this session, that there is a how are we ever going to do this that there was 8 years ago, or is it sort of we'll figure it out?
Yeah, they're sort of like, because they were able to do it 8 years ago, and because, gosh, the institutional memory hasn't changed all that much in 8 years, unfortunately. Yeah, I think they can handle it again. But then again, the question becomes, how do you handle it?
Right.
One thing they're talking about right away is, I call it kabuki theater. They're talking about, they have a thing called the Compensation Commission, which basically recommends raises for the higher level state employees. And the legislators, almost to a person, are saying, we're not going to accept those raises. Now, what people have to remember is the reason we created a compensation commission in the first place was so they could get those raises without actually having to vote on them.
Right.
Now what you have is a situation where unless you vote against them, they automatically take effect. So they won't get their raises. The question, I think, does become, though, what about the judges? Because the Chief Justice, Leo Strine, has said, look, we're having a hard time attracting really top-notch justices in a state that depends so much on the quality of our courts, especially as it pertains to the corporations. So I don't know if they have to reject the proposal all at one, or if they can actually make some exceptions. That's another thing to look at as well.
Okay, and as Governor-elect Carney becomes Governor Carney, let's do a little compare and contrast between him and Jack Markell. Obviously, very different styles. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that John Carney is very different than Jack Markell? Or are they not? Am I wrong in that assumption that it's just a surface thing?
I think their styles are different. But I think they're almost exactly the same person. A lot of people voted for Jack Markell. I did, because I thought he had the vision thing. It turned out his vision, in my opinion, was focusing on the corporations, making sure that whatever we did, we would fund them, quote-unquote, attract jobs to Delaware. And we spent a lot of capital, both political and fiscal, to do that. Now, John Carney, so far, I've seen... John had an interview with Larry Menti here on Channel 12, and I watched that interview, and I'm like, this guy is known for over a year he's going to be governor. He's been both a budget director and I believe Secretary of Finance under Carper and lieutenant governor for 8 years, and he was talking like, well, we're going to get our finance team together and see what we can do. What have you been thinking about for the last year? I mean, his campaign, in my opinion, had virtually no substance to it. I went on the blog. Do you know what his campaign slogan was? A new tomorrow. Well, technically every tomorrow is a new tomorrow, but I'm like, it ought to be meet the new boss same as the old boss. So I think stylistically there's a difference, but vision-wise, boy, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see the kind of vibrancy I think we need in that position right now.
All right, thanks, Steve Tanzer of DelawareLiberal.net. The next time we talk, John Carney will be governor, Donald Trump will be president, and Middletown voters will have to select a new state senator. Lots to talk about. Can't wait.
It's a new year, and there are new shows to watch at WHYY.org/first. This show is ready to watch in case you want to see one of our stories again. You can also watch our two-part program online profiling the 8 years of the Jack Markell administration in Delaware. In Delaware, there are more than 123,000 family caregivers. According to surveys, many of them feel left in the dark when it comes to administering care to their loved ones. The CARE Act, a new law which went into effect this year in Delaware, aims to bridge those gaps and give caregivers more help. Carol Barnett and Steve Slotkin are like many close-knit siblings. One starts a conversation and the other finishes it.
Tell her your I was born too soon story. Steve was born in 1963.
Yeah, we had to fight for everything we got.
Born with cerebral palsy, 53-year-old Flocken is no stranger to fighting for his rights. The baseball enthusiast was born before federal laws required children with disabilities to be educated in integrated public schools.
He went to regular kindergarten in like '69, and then basically they told my mom that he couldn't come back, they couldn't accommodate him. So he ended up in a specialized United Cerebral Palsy school. I mean, the district still had to educate him, but not in an integrated setting.
I was doing the same workbooks over and over.
So it was 5th grade when he was integrated back into the schools.
Flocken's parents remained his caretaker until their deaths. Following that, he lived in a nursing home for 20 years, but has been living with his sister for the last 14 years.
When I moved into this house 30-something years ago, I immediately got rid of the steps. There's no steps you saw when I came in. And along the way, we added a bathroom, we widened doorways. I mean, so we were pretty ready when we decided to make this move.
As her brother's primary caregiver, Barnett has always been proactive.
To me, when you're a caregiver for someone, you're helping them live their life. So you do what you have to do to ensure that that happens.
For Barnett, a health and social service employee, asking questions and getting help comes naturally. But for more than half of family caregivers in Delaware, it isn't that easy.
In 2014, we started with a survey in the state, and the survey showed that there were 123,000 family caregivers. So they are non-professional, non-paid family and friends and loved ones who are caring for somebody. And they're doing some common things like preparing meals and doing transportation, but they're also doing some really technical medical things more and more lately as people get sent home from the hospital sooner with more problems. So they're changing dressings, managing oxygen, managing IVs, just doing some technical stuff. And 78% of them told us that they were not really prepared for that. They didn't feel comfortable with enough coaching and teaching to be able to do it.
AARP's Sheila Grant says the CARE Act will help bridge those shortcomings.
It's really simple. It does 3 main things. It requires hospitals, when a person is admitted, to ask them, is there someone who takes care of you at home? And to record the name and contact information for that caregiver. And then when it comes time for discharge, they have to notify that person. And then before the discharge, they have to offer that caregiver a chance to come in for a face-to-face demonstration and instruction on the care that's going to be needed at home.
Grant says in most cases, caregivers were being advised, but not on a consistent basis. The CARE Act changes that because now it's a law. Grant adds the CARE Act will also help families be more proactive in pre-selecting a caregiver so that person can get the support they need in advance to taking on the duties.
Virginia Abrams was trained in organic and biochemistry, but in 1997, she discovered something else, quilting. Turns out she was able to marry her training with her love of sewing to turn it into wonderful art quilts. It's our first experience this week.
I've been making art quilts, which are quilts for the wall, for 20 years now, and they've just been wonderful fun. They're just fantastic. It's made to be put on the wall, so it doesn't have to have a design that is, comforting for somebody trying to go to sleep. I went to college in chemistry, and then I went to graduate school in organic chemistry. When I discovered quilting, I decided, aha! I was not going to teach biochemistry. By that time, I was teaching at the University of Delaware. I was going to make quilts. My mother always sewed everything in our household. Sewing had always been a wonderful thing, and actually in graduate school, on Saturday afternoon, I would sew in my room in the dorm and listen to the Metropolitan Opera. It was heaven on earth, and it made it so that whatever thing wasn't working in lab would go away. And it's still that way when I sit in my chair in front of the sewing machine, the world goes away. It's okay. But now I listen to NPR. I started by taking a class in dyeing silk scarves. Just putting color on white blank materials, just thrilling. It's wonderful. I started out and loved the Amish quilts, so the first quilts I made were Amish quilts. And then I soon moved to more geometric ones. After a while, I got a camera, and I was always looking for shapes that were abstract because that's what attracts me. And so the first large number of quilts I made based on my camera photographs were reflections and things in the water in a lake. And the reflection is fantastic. It's a natural abstraction. What I really like to do is figure out how to make this thing that I have in my mind a reality. I have 2 daughters and a sister who are very anxious to have pieces on their wall, so a lot of my pieces are there, and then I've sold a bundle of them too. But I'm not a great salesperson, so because what the joy is making a quilt rather than the sales part. I think what I like most about it is how beautiful the color is, and that it makes me say, oh, that looks cool.
You can see more of Virginia's work online at virginiaabrams.com.
Next week, more of our interview with Vice President Joe Biden as he prepares to come home to politics. Delaware.
And what I didn't like at the time was the Democratic Party was viewed as a Southern Democratic Party. It wasn't viewed as a Northeastern Democratic Party. And I remember one of the first campaigns I became aware of was the first African American to ever be elected to the state Senate, Herman Holloway. I remember the bumper stickers, proudly for Holloway.
And we'll check in with Sarah McBride. You'll remember her from last July's Democratic National Convention.
And that's a reminder that Tuesday, John Carney becomes the next governor of Delaware. We'll present special coverage Tuesday evening at 7:30 on WHYY-TV. That is first for this week. For Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston, I'm Mark Eichman. Thanks for watching. See you Tuesday.